Boker Tov. Today's daf is Daf Lamed Aleph in Baba Kama, and again we learned for Achim Kol Beis Yisrael and Asum Batzar V'Shivya, and there's the overriding concept that we're going to have today. We're going to have it more tomorrow also, but is that when you're driving behind somebody, you got to be careful, right? It's always the guy like what happens in insurance in America. Right. Yeah, if you okay, so normally when one car hits another car, the second car is responsible because he shouldn't have hit him, should have looked where he's going, kept his eye, right? Not get you went too close or should have been careful. However, if the first guy suddenly stopped, then it's questionable. So that's what we're going to talk about today also. Yesterday we talked about when two people were also kinds of nezek, when one person caused another person nezek in Rishus Rabbim. Here we're talking about people walking or driving, same thing in Rishus Rabbim. Two potters were walking, number one was walking first, number two was behind him. In Iskal Rishon, the first guy stumbled. And we had a machlokas the other day whether stumbling is considered negligence or not, right? So, but here we said the first guy stumbled, v'nafal, and he fell. V'niskal Hashem Rishon, the second guy stumbled over the first guy. The second guy stumbled over the first guy. Now, the first guy, we're going to see that even if you say that it's not negligent to fall, you can slip and fall. Certainly, the second guy's stumbling on the first guy is less of a negligence than the first guy. The first guy should have looked where he's going. He stumbled. The second guy was behind him, stumbled. So the first guy, in this case, caused the obstacle. This Rishon v'nafal, he fell. V'niskal sheni b'rishon. The second guy fell. The first guy. Harishon chayv v'niskal sheni. So over here, even though the second guy apparently didn't have time to stop, he was walking right behind the first guy. The first guy stumbled and fell. So we say that the first guy is responsible for damage done to the second guy. Now, let's understand, we're going to talk about this also. Done directly by his body or done by maybe his bag fell down that the guy tripped on his bag, his kalim, right? His kalim, did they cause damage? And what damage is he responsible for? Is he responsible for damage that he did to the second guy's person or to his kalim? So we're going to talk about this. Amar B'Yochanan. Says the Gemara, Lo Taima of Maslis. Don't say our Mishnah goes like a Meir to Amar Niskal Poshea, who says that a Niskal, the one who stumbled, is considered negligent, and that's why the first guy. Well, we said in our Mishnah, the first guy is to pay the second guy. If the second guy stumbled over the first guy, the first guy has to pay. It's the first guy's fault. Okay, don't say it's because the first guy is considered negligent b'chayiv. You could say that, but we're not saying that. Don't say our Mishnah goes like Rav Meir said the other day, Niskal Poshea. Ela filu Rabban, even Rabban Damer Onusu. Listen, if you stumble, it's an accident. It's not your fault. And Potter. So normally you're Potter. So why does the first guy have to pay for the second guy? The first guy stumbled. He fell down. It was an accident. Why should he have to pay? Because he should have stood up. In other words, that he fell, that's not considered negligence. He could have fallen, and if he broke something when he fell down, that was an accident. But here we're talking about he should have gotten up. What do you stay on the ground for? He should have gotten up. That's what Rabbi Yochanan says. The reason he's chayiv over here, so the first guy shouldn't have remained in the street. He should have gotten up. Rav Nachman, and even if he couldn't stand up, you should have warned the guy. Even if he couldn't stand up, he should have warned him. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Since if he couldn't stand up, right? You're saying even if he couldn't stand up, people would have warned the guy. If the guy couldn't stand up, he was busy licking his wounds and checking what he's damaged by the fall. He shouldn't. He's not responsible to warn the other guy. He has to watch out. It's hard because he was occupied with his injuries that he had fallen from. So Rabbi Yochanan says that the reason why the first guy has to pay for the second guy is not because he fell and caused the obstacle, because he didn't get up. Rav Nachman wants to say no. Even if he couldn't get up, he should have warned him, and he's responsible for that. Rabbi Yochanan says no. If you couldn't get up, you don't have to do the warning. The warning is not. You can't be blamed for not warning the guy behind you if you couldn't get up. If the reason our Mishnah says you're chayiv is because you should have gotten up. Now we're going to try to bring proofs from the Gemara. Now is going to probably bring from the next Mishnayos against Rabbi Yochanan, showing that it made a difference. Maybe just warning is what you should have done. Even if you couldn't stand up, you should have warned. Rabbi Yochanan says no. If you couldn't stand up, you're not responsible to warn either, because if you couldn't stand up, obviously you were injured or you were checking what was wrong with you, etc. and you're not obligated to warn the guy behind you. And therefore, the reason in our Mishnah where you're chayiv is because you should have stood up, you were able to stand up, and you didn't. So now Mishnah says we're going to have this Mishnah on the base. Two guys were walking in the street, and there was one man was holding a beam. He was holding a beam, and behind him was a man with a barrel. And obviously, the beam at one point struck the barrel and broke the barrel and caused damage. The barrel got lost, whatever was in the barrel, the wine, the honey, whatever. Nishbra chavas bekora, and the barrel got broken by the beam. Potter. Obviously, the owner of the beam is not responsible. He was walking first, as we said. Normally, the guy behind you, the second guy, when there's two people driving a car, riding horses, walking, the second guy should be careful not to run into the first guy. Over here, the first guy had a beam. He was walking with his beam, and the guy behind him crashed his barrel into the beam. So the first guy's not responsible for that. So this Rav Chavas B'Kora Potter. V'im Amad, if the guy with the beam suddenly stopped, made a sudden stop, then you could say Bal Korah Chayev. V'im Amad Bal Korah. If the Bal Korah, if the owner of the beam stops suddenly, then he's Chayev. My love. Now, why did he stop? My love, Sha'am L'Kotav. He was standing just to, you're holding a beam, you have to readjust it every once in a while. It's getting too heavy, it's slipping off your shoulder. My love, Sha'am L'Kotav, the Orcha, which is normal to do that, Viktani Chayev. And he's Chayev. Why is he Chayev? The Havil Hazir. Because he should have warned him, even though he was stopped for a legitimate reason, but he should have warned him. So you see, this L'chara goes like with Nachman Yitzchak, that even if you can't stand up, but you could have warned him, you're responsible for warning him. That's why you're chayiv in this case. If the first guy holding the beam stops suddenly, so Gemara says, "Lo, sha'am lafash." Here it's speaking about the reason why the first guy is responsible if he stops suddenly is when he stops suddenly for a rest. He didn't stop at that rest stop that they have. 2 miles ahead, there's a rest stop on the side. He didn't. He stopped in the middle of the street. He stopped in the street and just to rest. He wanted to take a break, which is not normal. Says Rashi, the mishunu, it's not made for that. You want to take a rest, you stop, you go off on the side, stop at a gas station, at a hotel, at a rest stop, don't stop in the middle of the street. But that's why he's chayiv, right? Not because he should have warned him, simply because he was wrong in stopping right there. Not to say that even if he couldn't avoid stopping because it was normal to stop to adjust the beam on his shoulder, he should have warned him. No, if you're too busy because of something that's beyond your control and you're doing something normal, you're not responsible to warn him. They're speaking about the reasons Chayv over here is because he took a rest. But if he just stood to readjust the beam on his shoulder, then you would taka be potter, even if he didn't warn the other guy because he's doing something normal. So Adatani Sefer, the Sefer says, Amod. Let's say he said, the first guy holding the beam was walking first, and he stopped suddenly and he said, Stop, I have to stop now. He's potter. So why talk the first case? He's chayiv because he stood to. You say he took the rest. And in the second case, if you told him to stop, you're potter. Why does he have to give that case your potter? Make an afkamina in the way you stop. Medvar, what if he stopped? If he warned him, then he's potter. You warned him. He said, "I'm stopping now. Be careful." Then you're potter. Why do you have to talk about that case? Listen to make an afkamina the way he stopped himself. Medvar, when do you say he's chayiv? If he stopped for resting, he stopped for resting without warning the guy, then he's chayav. But if he stood to adjust the beam shoulder, then he's potter. Why don't you make that nafkamina there? He says, no, you could make that nafkamina, right? So you're trying to answer if that would be the case that azhara is necessary. You're assuming over here the reason he's chayav is because he was mazer. And this is no, he stood. The reason he stopped is because he stopped to take a rest. That's why he's chayiv. He did something strange and just Rabbim. There's nothing to do with warning or not. So if that's the case, why didn't he make an afkamina between stopping to rest versus stopping to adjust? The answer is Hakamash Malon. The reason it tells you this is Hakamash Malon, the Afagav Damash, even though he did something abnormal, he stopped to take a rest here. Ki kamar lo labala chavas amod, he's still potter there. Meaning, yes, in both cases, we're talking about where he stood to take a rest, which was not normal. So if he stopped suddenly to take a rest, then he's chayiv to pay for breaking the barrel, even though the barrel was behind him. But if he stopped the rest, which is abnormal, but he said, stop, I'm warning you, then he's potter. That's the chiddush there. Yes, If he stopped just to adjust it, he wouldn't have had to say anything. He would have been potter. The reason he's chayiv is because he stopped to take a rest. That's abnormal, and that's why he has to pay. But there's no proof that for ashara at all. Tashma, let's bring another proof against Rabbi Yochanan. Again, Rabbi Yochanan says that the reason why you're chayiv in our Mishnah, the first guy stumbled and the second guy stumbled on top of the first guy, is because the first guy should have gotten up, not because in this goes poshea. That's understandable. He fell down. The stumbling itself does not mean he's negligent, but he should have gotten up. So Rabbi Yochanan says, no, even if he couldn't stand up, he should have warned him. And the fact that he didn't warn him, that's why he's chayiv. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, if you can't stand up, you don't have to warn either. Tashma will bring a proof. It's like another case we're going to have later on. You had potters and glazers, people, people carrying breakables, earthenware, glass. Again, one was number one. Number two was following number one. This go Rishon. The first guy fell down. The first guy stumbled and fell down. Listen carefully. The second guy stumbled on top of the first guy. Then there was the third guy. The third guy stumbled too. What do they call that? Multiple car accident, right? I think there's another word for it, right? Like chain reaction, but there's a word for it. They call that. There's a slang word for it. What you're calling is the formal word, a multiple car, a pile up, whatever. There's a pile up. The first guy stumbled. The second guy stumbled on the first guy, and the third guy stumbled on the second guy. Listen to the halacha here. Rishon chayiv in his sheni. The first guy is responsible for the damage done to the second guy. V'sheni chayiv in his shlishi is chayiv for the damage done to the second guy. Chayiv for the damage done to the third guy. V'machmas rishon naflu. Let's say everybody fell because of the first guy. In other words, the third guy didn't stumble on the second guy. They all fell because of the first guy. How did that happen? We'll see. If the first guy fell and blocked the whole road. We call that jackknifing, right? He jackknifed and broke the whole thing. Yeah, no, not the dominoes. The domino, the second guy fell on the first guy. The third guy fell on the second guy. That's dominoes, right? Here we're talking about the first guy jackknifed and everybody stumbled on him. Then he has to pay damages for every machmas rishon naflu rishon chayiv in his kekulam. Them is heroes zeh. But if they warned one another, as the second guy went down, he warned the third guy. As the first guy went down, he warned the second guy. Then pturim. Again, all you have to do is warn him. Like Rav Nachman said, Nachman Yitzchak said, if he warned him, that's good enough. Even if he couldn't get up, my love. Shelo hayalan lama. Are we speaking where they couldn't stand up, whatever they were injured, whatever they couldn't stand up, but they should have yelled out, and that's why they're responsible, which proves like Rav Nachman, because according to Rabbi Yochanan, if they couldn't stand up, then they're potter. The reason you're chayv in a mishnah is because he could have stood up. My love shelo lamed, lo shelo lamed. No, you don't say speaking where they couldn't stand up, but they could warn, and that's the issue here. If you warned or not, lo shelo lamed. They could have stood up, right? They could have stood up, and that's why they're chayiv to pay. Avalo lamed, but if they wouldn't stand up, my potter. Again, if that's the case, that they're chayiv because they could have stood up and they didn't stand up, and therefore they caused this chain reaction. But if they wouldn't be able to stand up, they'd be potter. Yochi had a ton of sefer. Why didn't sefer say if they warned one another, you're potter? Again, they make enough mean itself by the way, by the physical aspect of could they stand up? When do you say number one has to pay for number two and number two has to pay for number three when they could have stood up and they didn't? But if they weren't able to stand up, then they'd be potter. Why don't you say that itself? Why did you say this nafkamina that you say that speaking about where they couldn't stand up? So if that's the case, why say in the sefer? But if they warned one another, they're potter. Make an afkamina where they could stand up or not. Again, hakamashma the tchish is dafagavim, even though they could have stood up. Yes, he was and they're potter there too. Again, if the idea that Rabbi Yochanan is saying is, and passing Rabbi Yochanan, is that the reason for your chiyuv is because you could have stood up and you didn't, not because you're poshea. Poshea is not. Niskal is not poshea. A person who stumbles is not necessarily negligent. He's not responsible for that. He's responsible for not standing up. He could have corrected the situation. It's like when a person had an accident and you didn't clear the accident. You fell down, you should have gotten up. If you couldn't stand up, okay, then you're potter. But the reason our Mishnah, why number two has to be paid by number one or number three by number two in the Brisa, is because they should have stood up and they didn't. But even so, it says that even if they could stand up, even if they could stand up and they didn't, but they warned one another, they're also potter. Not that nafmin is whether they could have stood up or not. If they couldn't stand up, then they're potter. If they could stand up, they're chayiv. But even if they could stand up and they didn't, but they warned one another, that's also okay. They're putzah because he warned him. He said, he gave him fair warning and said, be careful, don't trip over me. Amar Rabba. In this last case, in the Brisa, we were talking about three cases, three people, a chain reaction, a pile up, 1, 2, and 3. Amar Rabba. Rishon Chayiv ben Iskeshen. Listen carefully. Now, this is a very difficult piece of Gemara. Amar Rabba. Rishon Chayiv ben Iskeshen. Let's call it Reuben, Shimon, and Levi, right? First was Reuben, then Shimon stumbled on Reuben, and Levi stumbled on Shimon. So the first guy, Reuben is Chayev ben Iskei Sheni, Bain ben Iskei Gufo, Bain ben Iskei Mamono. Reuben is Chayev for damaging Shimon, whether he did the damage with his body or with his assets, with his shatel, right? Whether it's whether he let's say he dropped something, or he had an animal or something with him, whatever, something else caused the damage, not the man himself, right? So he says that Reuben is chayiv to pay for damages done to Shimon, whether he did the damage with his body, like the guy tripped over him or he hurt him, or some of his assets did the damage, right? Let's say he had a vase with him and that fell down and the guy tripped on that. Sheni chayiv b'niskei shlishi. Shimon is only chayiv for damaging Levi b'niskei gufa v'lo b'niskei mono. Only if he damaged Shimon, if Shimon damaged his body. Remember, adam mu'ed la'olam. A person is always responsible, even if he's asleep, he's responsible for his actions. There's different cases where there's an accident, but if it's not an accident, here you don't consider this an accident. You should have done something. You should have gotten up. But he's not responsible for damage done with his assets. Now, what's the difference? We have Reuben, Shimon, and Levi. If Reuben fell and Shimon fell on him or his assets, it makes no difference. He's chayav. Reuben has to pay for damage that Reuben did with his body or Reuben did with his assets. Whereas Shimon only has to pay for Levi with damage done by his body, but not with his assets. Why? So the Gemara Manavshach, what's the difference? If you say that a person who stumbled is considered negligent, so Sheni Namil Chayev. The second guy stumbled, the first guy stumbled, the second guy stumbled. Should also be Chayev. If you say that it's not considered a negligence at all, if it was an accident, meaning the fact that he stumbled is not considered negligence, so why should he have to pay also? So again, that's the question the Gemara raises. The Rashi here is really all the way down on Amid Beis here, before the wide lines, because on the Rashi on the words that we just covered on Amid Aleph is really those words are covered on Amid Beis, different gears over here. So the Gemara answers Rishon Vada Peshehu. The first guy is Vada Posheya, and we're assuming now that means that in this skull, if you stumble, you're Posheya, like Rav Meir said before. Rishon Vada Posheyahu. The first guy is Vada Posheya, and therefore he's responsible for all damage that he did. Sheni, the second guy, Shimon, Agufa Machayev, he's chayev for his body. Now we're saying like this. Take a look at Rashi, even with Yolyon Hashas, even with the words Masnisan in the Gemara, right before the 5, 6 lines before the lines get wide. Rishon Vada Posheya says Rashi ben Nafshei Nafal. The first guy fell on his own. What about his mammon? What about his assets? It's like he dug a bore. What is a bore? Bore is a pit. But what is bore? Bore means if you left your knife or your broken glass or anything you left in Rishus Harabim, that's a bore. So on his body, if Reuben damaged Shimon with Reuben's body, if he's a mazik. And in his mammon, his assets that fell down, his belongings, let's call it, his belongings sounds better, I think. Mamona means his belongings. Havlagrace is digging a bore. Umachayev mia agufa desheni, and he's chayev for damaging the body. When we say Reuben's chayev for damages that he does to Shimon, whether he did it with Reuben's body or Reuben's belongings, either way, but it's damage that he did to Shimon's body, not to Shimon's belongings. Why? Because if he did the damage done by Reuben's belongings to Shimon's belongings is a bore, and bore is patur and Caleb. Shor below Adam, chamor below Caleb. So he's not chayiv there. So machayiv mi agufo desheni uksava rava, going on a Rashi before the lines get wide. Uksava rava the Rabbanan lo pligal Rav Meir. Rabbanan don't argue with Rav Meir b'nisko poshe. Everybody holds that. Abai said before it's a machlokas between Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda or Rav Meir and Rabbanan whether niskos poshe. Everybody holds at this point that niskos posheya. Ella, the machlokas is only after you fell by accident. You tripped on something, you fell by accident, and your zikr, is that a bor or not? But if you fell by itself, in other words, we're saying at this point, keep your finger there. We're at the end of the first of the wide lines in Rashi, and look at the top of the page in the Gemara. Rishon v'adei poshehu, because he fell and he stumbled on his own, and he's responsible. He's responsible for any damage he did to Shimon with his body, right? Or that he did with his assets, with his belongings. Why? Because his belongings is now a bore. He dropped, but give me an example. He was holding a glass in his hand, right? When he was walking, he's holding his coffee, and he stumbled and he fell down. And if he did damage directly to Shimon with his body, then he's responsible for that. If he did damage with his broken coffee cup, the china fell down and broke, then he's responsible for damaging with his bore. But, right, with his bore, because bore is chayav for damage done to a person, not for killing a person, but for damage done to a person. So Rishon Posheo, Sheni, Agufo, but the second guy, Sheni, top line in the Gemara now. Sheni, Agufo Machayiv is chayav to Havilei, and he should have stood up. Not that his responsibility is great, but the first guy stumbled on his own, right? Reuven stumbled on his own. Shimon stumbled on Reuven. That's not as bad. It's somewhat bad, but it's not so bad. But he should have stood up. Sheni, Agufo Machayiv chayav to Havilei Lam. I'm a mono potter. Why is he potter for his mom and for his heaven? I didn't dig this. I didn't dig this pit. Who dug this pit? Reuven. He's the one who fell down and caused the whole problem. The chain reaction, as you call it, the pileup. He was the one who started this. Sheni, now look in Rashi, the end of the first of the wide lines of Rashi. Sheni ben Nifil also onusu. He's an onus. He fell there. It was an accident. Agufo mi mechayv, but he's chayv in kamas b'yadayim. So he should have stood up. That's what we're saying right now. In other words, we're trying to say what's the difference between Reuven to Shimon versus Shimon to Levi. Reuven is certainly Poshea. We're assuming now that Nisko is Poshea. So he's Poshea, and on his body he's chayav because he's doing damage to Shimon with his body. And if his assets, if his broken coffee cup does damage to Shimon, he's chayav because that's his bore. Okay. Sheni, the second guy though, is not as responsible because he fell down by accident on the first guy. When we say Nisko is Poshea, the first guy is Poshea, but the second guy fell on the first guy. He was right in front of him. He stopped. Suddenly, he fell down. And he fell on top of the second guy. Fell on the top of the first guy. So therefore, his responsibility is only his good because he should have stood up. But as far as his belongings go, David Monopotter, he says, I didn't dig it. All right, that's how you're explaining it right now. I'm reading Rashi now, the third line of the wide lines of Rashi. If you're mafkir and chasam after an accident, we said before you're potter. Even why it says that the Shimon lost his coffee cup too. So why can't he say the answer is because he could, if he's mafkir and chasam after an accident, he's potter for that. That's what we said before. What are you chayav for bor when you threw the bor in Rosh Hashanah, or by you left it there? But if it was by accident and you're mafkir, you're potter. That's what we're saying right now. Meisvei, back in the Gemara, the end of the third line of the Gemara. Meisvei, the Brisa says like this: all of them, meaning Reuven to Shimon and Shimon to Levi, they're all chayav on damage done by their body. Upturin on niskim mamona. Then he says you're potter on niskim mamona. Now Rava say Reuven's chayav whether his body or his belongings did the damage to Shimon. Shimon's only chayiv on his body because he should have stood up and he didn't. But he's potter on this mamon because he's mafir nechasm after an accident. He's potter for that. But here the Brisa says, "Kul and chayav on this give." They're all chayiv for damage done by their body, meaning Reuven to Shimon and Shimon to Levi. Who and they're potter for damage done by their belongings. Everybody's potter, meaning Reuven too. That goes against what Rava said. My love afilo rishon. Even Reuven damaging Shimon is also potter on his assets, on his belongings, damaging Shimon. It says low. We've seen except for the first one. But it said kulam. The Brisa just said kulam. They're all of them. Who's all of them? We're only talking about two guys over here. There's only Reuven and Shimon. Reuven's chayav for damaging Shimon. Shimon's chayav for damaging Levi. It says kulam. They're all chayav on damage done by their body, but not damage done by their assets. Okay. He says no. He doesn't mean Reuven, but he said kulam. Kulam hanazokin, the ones who were damaged. The kulam is going on the nezakin, the ones who were damaged, right? All the ones that are damaged, right? We're not talking about kulam. We're not talking about Reuven. Reuven wasn't damaged. Reuven damaged the others, right? Reuven stumbled, right? He damaged Shimon, Shimon damaged Levi. The ones who were damaged are only chayiv for that for mum. So you're only talking about Shimon and Levi. So they're only chayiv for niskei gufa, not for this one. Because again, we said Shimon is only chayiv to Levi for damage done by Shimon's body, not by his assets, because he said, I didn't make this pit. Says Gemara, hi mai, I understand you. Yeah, if you say Reuben and Shimon are both potter on damage done by their belongings, says all of them. If you mean except for the first guy, meaning only the ones who are damaged, my kulan, listen to him a second. Just say, what do you say, kulan? Just say the ones who are damaged. The ones who are damaged can only recover losses done by the one who damaged them's body, but not by not by the one who damaged them's assets. Say it that way. Say, what do you say, kulan? Listen to him a second. So Rava now changes it temporarily. We'll see a different shot. Rava, when Rava really means it could be that others have a gears. It's not Elam Rava because Rava was the one who explained it. Rava, we're dealing with Rava, but it means like this: Elam Rava Rishon Chayev Bein Beniske Gufa the Sheni Beniske Risheni. What it means is this: we're trying to explain what do you mean over here. The Brisa says you're only chayev on damage done by the body, not by the broken coffee cup that fell down when you broke. So he says, you know what it means? Rishon chayev bein beniske gufa the sheni means whether you're chayev on this case goof of the second person, not damage done by Reuben's own body, but in this case goof that he did to the body of Shimon bein beniske mamona the sheni. That's what he's trying to explain it. The Brisa means this, that we says kulan chayev on this case goof and upton on mamona, right? You're potter on damage done by the coffee cup. How does Rava jibe with that? It means this. Reuben, when Rava said that Reuben's chayiv for Shimon for everything, and Shimon's only chayiv for Levi on gufa. So you know what it means? Reuben is chayiv for damage that he did to the goof of Shimon or to the assets of Shimon. Why? Because Reuben is a person. He's not a boar, right? And when Reuben fell, you're chayiv for damage you do to another person. You're chayiv for damage you do to his assets, to his car, to his donkey, to anything that he owns. That's what it means over here. We're trying to say that you're not chayiv for damage done by your belongings, your coffee cup that broke, right? That's what the Brisa said, that everybody is only chayiv on damage done by the body, not by the belongings. So when Rava said, Reuben's chayiv for guf and mamon, Shimon's only chayiv for guf. What's pshat? Elam Rava, Rishon chayiv eminaske guf for the sheni, not done by the guf of Reuben, but he's chayiv for the nezakim done, the damage done to the body of Shimon, bein beniske mamona sheni, or the assets that he's in because he's doing it himself. The sheni chayiv beniske shlishi beniske guf. The sheni, the second guy, who's less responsible because he fell on the first guy. He's responsible for damage that he did to the body of Levi. Avalo beniske monat was in my timer, the havile bor, because we're explaining now that Shimon effectively is like a boar. Shimon's like a boar because he fell down by accident on top of the first guy. So he's like a boar. Boar is not chayv for Caleb. Reuven, you say, is somewhat responsible because he was the first one who stumbled. So he's chayv for any damage that he did to Shimon, whether Shimon or Shimon's assets, right? Shimon's only chayv for damage that he did with his own body because he should have stood up. But he's not responsible for any damage that he did to the belongings because he's like a boar there, and you don't find that a boar is chayv on Caleb. So now take a look at Rashi. Take a Rashi about 6-7 lines down in the page in Rashi in the wide lines. I mean, Reuben's not chayiv for damage done by Reuven's coffee cup to Shimon. The la posheyahu. He stumbled. Stumbling is not posheya. She is a gufo. But the only damage we're talking about is the difference between Reuven and Shimon. That Rav was painting is talking about nezakim that he did with Reuven's body. The first guy is a mazik. He wasn't negligent in that he fell, but he should have gotten up. And therefore, if he did any damage to Shimon, whether to Shimon's body or to Shimon's ass, he has to pay. But damage was done by Reuven's body. But the second guy, Shimon, even if he should have stood up, he's not as bad as Rishon. The Rishon poshet tfei misheni, more of a poshet. So it's a fine difference. Hilkach Rishon Badi Avimazik B'Sheni Mistai. It's enough in Mishavas like Gufa, make him like a boar. Sheni, it's enough if Shimon is like a boar now. In what sense? He's chayav for damage done to Levi's body, but he's not chayav for Levi's assets, for Levi's belongings, because boar is not chayav on Caleb. Ubraisa the tani kulan chayavan on this guf with the mashma filu sheni going to against gufo shel shlishi. That's what we mean to say. We're not talking when we talk about guf and mammon. We're talking about the damaged person, not the one who's doing the damage. Again, we assumed in the Havmina that Reuben's talking about damage done by your body, by the damager's body, or by the damager's belongings. Now we're saying no. He's talking about the belongings and the body of the one who's damaged. And again, take a look back in the Gemara. Of damage that Reuben himself did by his body, but not by his belongings. Why? Because his belongings is like a boar, and a boar is not chayiv on belongings. B'sheni chayiv, right? B'sheni chayiv, b'niskei shlishi, b'niskei kufa, avalo b'niskei mono. But not damage that he did to his mom. Why? Because he himself is a boar. He himself is a boar, and the boar is not chayiv on damage done to Caleb. My time, like Bobo, let's see what Shachab skips. Well, there's a problem here. You could say Shmuel says anything you put in Rosh Hashanah, whether you're mafkir, not mafkir, is a boar. So you could say a person who fell is also a boar. You know, if I guess here's a terrible example. If you killed somebody and took the body and threw it in the street, that's also a boar. You know, you could say it that way. El Rav the Amar. Rav says Rav says the boar is only if it's hefker. Lo. So you're not mafkir your body. Even if Shimon fell and got hurt, whatever, he's not mafkir his body, so you can't call that a boar. Michael, maybe this far doesn't work. To say that we're talking about the object rather than the damager, we're talking about the object of the one who's damaged. That doesn't work, and that's why the second guy Shimon is potter potter from damaging the assets of Levi, because Shimon himself is a boar. According to Reuven, Shimon can't be a boar, can't be mafker himself. Michael Maimer. So we're going back to the first way now. We're going back to the first way. We're talking about when Rava said that Reuven's chayav for damage done to Shimon, not to Shimon's assets or Shimon himself. We're talking about when Reuven did damage with himself or with his assets. With his teacup hurt the other guys also potter. What did we say? We said kul and chayavin. We said the Brisa said kul and chayavin on this kiguf and p'ton this moment. What are you going to do there? Rava says that Reuben's chayav for nizakim that he did with his assets, with his belongings, with his teacup that fell. Targum Ravada Barava Kamed Ravina. Shuz a Kalim. We're talking about if you Kalim damage other Kalim. Kalim damage other Kalim. Kalim are like a boar, and they damage other Kalim. They're potter for that. That's what he means over there. When he says over here, again, take a look at now in the Gemara, in Rashi rather, Rashi further down. Says Targum about halfway down in the wide lines, and Rashi says, like we're going to what said originally. The Gufa, the Rishon, the Sheni, Havik Mazik and be a Dayim. Whether it's Reuven or Shimon's bodies, that's like Nash B'chayv Alcohol. Afilu Shmuel Domer immediately after having bore Hani Mili B'Momen Ava B'Gufo Adamu, and you're damaged. Even says everything, even if you're not after something bore, that the person's damaging with his body. If you damage with your body, you're chayiv on everything. So Reuben's chayiv even on damage that he did to Shimon's kalim because he did the damage with his body. Umar Sharishon the Shmuel Shmuel Ben Afker Ben Lafke have he bore Ularav Elo afkare, elo afkare. So therefore, it's a bore, right? In other words, if damage done by your body, you're chayiv in all cases, right? You did it yourself. And damage done by the first guy's teacup that fell and broke, and this or coffee cup, whatever, broke, and that did damage to Shimon. Yes, you're chayiv for a boar's chayiv for damage to another person's body. Ularav elo afkare chayiv. If you were not mafkare, you're chayiv because it's also your bore. The afkare have a board, then nisko me'atzmo posheu, right? If the afkare, then it's a board, then nisko me'atzmo posheu. And then now we're saying that nisko, the first guy is responsible, is a posheu. Umonu shosheni potter afal niske guf shlishi. Why? The nezik amufkal deones is potter. You know, after shoru b'tafel pay shariyonasu. It's like, you know, it's not his fault. Umilsa the Rava mituk mebein Rav Meir Shapiro kashaf brasa. What about the price that said shafilu rishon memono potter? The price says even the first guy, Ruvain's a moment is potter. Hainu heicha the husku kalim the sheni bekel the rishon the mifta mishum the born in of lo chayv was a kalim. So therefore, it makes sense this way. Again, what is Rava saying at the end of the day? You look back on Rava on Amid Aleph, Rava rishon chayv neskesheni bein neskei move. In other words, if you did damage to Levi, Reuben did damage to Levi, he's chayv whether he did it with his body or whether he did it with his teacup. If he did the damage with his teacup, why? Because damage you do to a person, even if your teacup is a boar now, but you set up a boar and your boar is chayiv for damaging a person. Where the Brisa said that kulan chayiv on this gegufon upturn on this mamona, that's if your mamon damaged the other guy's mamon. If your boar damaged the other guy's kalim, boar is patur on kalim. That's what he means. But your boar is chayiv for damaging Levi. Why is for damaging Shimon? Why is Shimon patur for damaging Levi? Why is Shimon damaging Levi? We said Shimon is not a boar. The answer is Shimon is only chayiv on damage that he did with his body, and he'd be chayiv for damage that he did with his body, even on the kalim of Levi. Right? He'd be chayiv on that, but he's patur on the kalim. He's patur on the kalim. Why? Rash said the kalim. Lo milsa Rava kavishim rikar. The rishim chayiv vafilu shmul damar aval begufo arbu v'lo bor. The chayiv on this kalim umamonos rishim shmul bet after bilo after bor after yavkei miskav sheu umamonos shosheni patur afal niske guf shlishi the nezik hamufgal day onusu because it's like a boar that was mufgal day onus through an accident. If it was mufgal not by a person, the first guy Reuven fell, that's his fault. He fell miskos parshea, and therefore if he damaged Shimon, either he damaged Shimon with his body, or even if his assets, his boar damaged Shimon, he's also chayiv because your boar damaged. Not if he killed Shimon, but if the boar damaged. The second guy though who fell, right? His accident was because of the first guy's, and if he did damage with his body, he should have stood up, but he didn't. The damage he did with his assets, with his teacup, is patur. Why? Because it's came al yidei and ones mufka yidei ones. You're patur for that, and therefore that's why the Brisa said that all assets are patur. Right? Even Reuven's teacup that damaged Shimon's would be patur. That's against Rava. No, that's only if Reuven's teacup damaged Shimon's teacup. It damaged his assets. But if his teacup damaged Shimon in any way, then he'd be chayiv. That's what Rava means. That's what he means in the Gemara. Back in the Gemara, the kashlach kurin chayav and talking about very simply. Shehusku kalim b'kalim. Reuven's kalim are responsible if they damage Shimon's body. Again, Reuven says Reuven is responsible for any damage he did to Shimon, whether he damaged Shimon's body, whether he damaged Shimon's kalim with his body, with his own body. But if his kalim damaged Shimon, yes, they'd be chayiv for that. His boar damaged Shimon. But if his kalim damaged Shimon's kalim, they'd patur because Reuven's kalim is a boar, and the boar is patur on kalim. That's how it works out up here. Amar Mar, im machmas risho naflu. He said in the Mishnah that if they fell because of the first guy, right? Then rishon chayiv b'niskei kulam. If there was Reuben, Shimon, and Levi, Shimon's following Reuben, Levi's following Shimon. And if they all fell because of the first guy, then he's chayiv for all of them because he was a posher. How did he fall? Usually you think of a chain reaction, right? Or dominoes. You said, how does that work? So Rapapa Omer de Pascal Kishilda. It was like a carcass that fell across the whole road. He blocked jackknife. We call that jackknife, and cut off the whole road. Rav Zvid Omar, and maybe jackknife only works on a tractor trailer. I think that's the word. But the point is, he fell across the road, right? Rav Zvid Omar kachutu desamusa, like a blind man's stick. It fell across the whole way and blocked the whole way. So if the first guy fell in a way that the second guy and the third guy and the fourth guy, in fact, they all fell because of him, then he's responsible for all. Now this is the Mishnah. This is the Mishnah we referred to before. Yeah. Yeah.
Could you just explain the thing with with Hefker here?
Yeah, with Hefker, just means this. Very simply making an afkamina. According to Shmuel, any feed you put in the street, you're chayiv for, with your mafkir or not. Rav holds it's only bor if you're mafkir. If it's yours, it's not hefker, then it's damaged because of shore. But even here, be potter, that's what I should say. Even it's like your shore, it's like your keren, if it's yours, it's not bor, right? So you say, but your bor, so if it's your keren, you're also chai, but it was an accident. Anything, the point is that we're going to the idea that the second guy, Shimon, who fell on Reuven, he stumbled on Shimon, he's responsible for not getting up. So any damage he did to Levi with his body, fine. But anything we did to his assets is like a bor that he was mafker, and he's potter because it came about through an ones. In other words, somebody caused an accident, and then somebody caused an accident, and you had your glass items were in the street, you're mafker because of an accident, you're not responsible for that bor.
Thing is automatically hefker, but because it's an onus, we don't count.
That's right, we don't count. Exactly right. Right. So therefore, even if he did damage with those assets to Levi's person, to the body, he still would be potter.
Suppose when he falls,
right,
he actually breaks his leg and he can't get up. He still
no, then he's not responsible. Then he's not. If he can't get up, that's what the Mishnah said in the first case. That if he can't get up, it's not his fault. Okay. Right? He can't get up, then it's not his fault. That's excuse me. Let me qualify. That's the way Rabbi Yochanan explained the Mishnah, because he said Nisko is not Poshea. If you hold that Nisko is Poshea, that the first guy stumbled and it's his fault, and even if he broke his leg, it's still his fault. So it depends if you hold Nisko as Poshea or not. At the end, we came out that Nisko, Rabbi Yochanan said it's not because of Nisko Poshea, but at the end, this last shot in the Gemara, we're saying that the first guy is responsible because he is Poshea. Right? He says that's what Rashi said. Lola Milsa Rabbi Kadashimir Mikara, Lafarisha Bishani, and the first Gechayim for the Guf. So it depends. Even if you say Nisko, he says Mashma Nisko is Poshea. So if you hold that Nisko stumbling is Poshea, if you hold that way, it's machlokas. If you hold that Nisko is Poshea, so just for falling, it's your fault. You're negligent. If you can't get up now because of that, that's still your fault. But if you hold Nisko is not Poshea, that's not considered negligence, then the negligence here would be that you didn't get up when you could. And if you couldn't get up, then you're not responsible. Again, the case we had before, we mentioned this Mishnah, that one guy is coming along with his barrel of wine, let's say. Another guy's coming along with the beam. If they're coming in opposite directions, they're coming facing one another. Whose fault is it? They didn't have a divider in the road. Two guys are coming facing each other. One guy's got a beam, one guy's got a barrel. And they ran into each other. Who's responsible? Nobody is. They're potter because they both had the right of way. They both had right of way. Talk about they both had a right. Shows that potter. Shows that they both have permission. No, let's say they weren't facing one another. They both had equal right of way. Not that case. Let's say the first guy was what? The guy with the beam was walking first, and the guy with the barrel was behind him. So the guy with the barrel should have watched the guy with the beam. Potter balakora. Right? The balakora is potter because he said, "Why did you run into me? You crashed into me. Not my fault." Im Ahmad balakora. We said if the balakora stopped suddenly, and we said he's like a posheh, right? He stops suddenly, then he's chayav. Even though he stopped suddenly and he was poshea, he said, "Wait, halt, stop." He warned him. That means like putting your brakes on and your lights show, Im Amar Labalabayis, Amar Labalachavis. He told the Balachavis stand. Then he's potter. Let's say it was the other way around. The barrel was walking first, and the guy with the beam was following him, and the guy with the beam crashed and broke the Nishbra Chavis Bakara. Then the guy with the beam is responsible because he crashed into the barrel. He was following the barrel. Imam Bal Chavas, again, if the guy with the barrel stopped suddenly, then the guy with the beam is potter. Imam Bal Kora, but if he said stop, Imam halt, Amod, then he's chayiv because he should have stopped. And therefore, if the Bal Chavas was shooting and he didn't stop and he ran into him, he's chayiv. One guy's coming with his fire and one's coming with his flax. Again, it's the same idea that one is damaging the other. The same rules would apply. If they both had the right of way, you're potter. If the damager was following the other guy, he should have stopped. It was the other way around. He didn't have to. Rabba Barnosa Mirafuna. This strange question. A man damages his wife while they were having bia. What would you say there? Now, apparently, maybe they got divorced right afterwards, and she had a claim against him. Otherwise, they're married. Even if he pays her, he acquires it anyway, right? So what's the rule here? presumably we're talking about where there was a claim out. Even the B'shus Kavadi say since he did it in their normal manner while they were married, he didn't do anything abnormal. Potter. Odilma Boiling should have been more careful. If he hurt her, let's say he physically hurt her, she required medical attention. Amalei Tanisua, we learned if you both have permission. Over here, they were both doing things in the normal way, and they both had permission there. If each had Rishus Salach, you should be Potter. Amarava, Rava said, look at the other way around. You say from our Mishnah, if they both have permission to walk, let's say they have the right of way, they both have the right of way over here, then you should be Potter. Amarava, Kavachomer, the other way around. What's the case when you go into Golis, when you killed somebody by accident, right? You went into the forest, they both went into the forest, and they picked up the axe and the thing flew off, right? And it killed the guy. Both had permission to go into the forest. Still, you're responsible for killing that guy. Okay, you're not high of death because you didn't do it on purpose, but you got to go into Golis. Your life is ruined. It's like, even though they both had permission, still it's as if the murderer went into the rishus of the other guy. And Yechayev, here, the husband certainly went into the rishus of the wife. He inserted himself into her. Lo kolshke, certainly he should be responsible. Ella haktani shelazev rishus lahalach. What about our Mishnah? Mishnah says that if they both have permission to be there, they both have the right of way. You're potter. Husband to buy kadadina there, they're both the same. Hacha iu kavet ma'isa. There, they're both in the case where one guy's walking with a beam and the other guy is walking towards him with the barrel. They both had right of way. They both had permission to be there, right? They're both equal. But over here, the husband is doing the action. You covered Maisa. Says Marvahilo, she's not doing a Maisa. It says when it comes to adultery, they're both killed. Why did you say she didn't do anything? Mikaravan says they're both killed. Mikaravan says Hanol Tavayusli, but they're both involved in it. They both have pleasure. But he is doing the Maisa, and therefore the argument can be made. That he should have been more careful. And if there's a claim, she might have a claim against him. Hayabalkar Rishon. So the Mishnah is like this. The Mishnah, if he was Balkar was first, so the guy with the beam was walking first, and the guy with the barrel was behind him, right? Amr Shlakesh, Shtei Paros B'Shus Rabam. It's the case we've had several times before. Two cows were in the Shisarab. One is lying down. One's walking. If the one who was walking kicked the one who was lying down, Tura, because she shouldn't have been lying down over there. If the one who was lying down kicked the one who was walking in the normal way and permission to be there, they'd be chayav. Layman Messiah, so we have a proof from our Mishnah. If the Balkar was first, the Baal Chavas Achron, so Baal Rishon, right? Nishbura Chavas Bekora, Potter, right? You're Potter if the guy with the barrel crashed into the guy with the beam, he's Potter. The Imamad, if he stood, the Imamad Balkora, if the Balkora stopped suddenly, Chayev. Bahacha the Karavutza K'malechestami. Over here, it's like when the guy with the barrel, when the guy with the beam stopped suddenly, he had no business. It's like the cow lying down in the street there. He had no business lying down. This guy had no business stopping suddenly. Says V'tizbra ha-saiba. Do I need proof for this? I understand. If you're saying if the cow lying down in the street damaged the cow walking by, clearly he had no right to do that. He had no business lying down in the street. I need a proof for that. Lomastai, now I'll tell you that not only that, Lomastai, that you're bringing a proof, like, is this a proof? Does it need a proof? Not only is this not a proof, Lomastai, not only is not really a proof, Elamakshanami Kasha, you could ask a Kasha from this case on the case of the Ravutza. Why? Time of the Bata says, why? The lion who was laying down kicked the one who was walking. Let's say he didn't kick. That's just damaged him because he was walking and he stumbled on him. Smash should be Potter. Why should it be Potter? But Maslis in the Mamela, but Tani, and our Mishnah is talking about where if it's Mamela, if the barrel crashed into the beam, but Maslis in the Mamela, but Tani Chayav, you could say the same thing where when the beam stopped suddenly, the barrel crashed into him. That's like the cow walking and tripping on the animal that was kicked, and that's mashma. It's mashma. You'd be potter in the case of the if the lying down animal did not kick the other animal, it's mashma be potter. Here it's mashma that he'd be chayav because the fact that he was laying in the street there where he shouldn't have been is like the beam stopping suddenly. So the masnis and the pascal urcha kishilda. The Mishnah is speaking about where he blocked the whole road. You block the whole road. Hacha could go in the rubber b'chad gisa. You could say Mishnah is like where the beam blocked the whole road, and that's why it's not a kasha from the Mishnah. The Mishnah is where the beam blocked the whole road, so you had no option. Whereas in the case of the animal was lying down on one side of the street. He could have gone on the other side. So you can't ask the kasha. Eliseifa, let's just finish. Eliseifa, the masnis and the silent. The end of the Mishnah is a proof of Rish Lakish. The Tani hayabal chavas rishon ubal kora achron. It says what? If the owner of the barrel was walking first and the owner of the beam was following him, nishba chavas bekora, and the barrel broke by the kora because of a kora crashed into Michayev. Vim amad bal chavas, and if the owner of the barrel stops suddenly, potter, he's potter. Over here, this is like a guy walking and jump into the one. It's like the animal that was walking and he tripped into the one that was laying down. Viktani potter, and you say in our Mishnah that he's potter if he crashed in there. So it's a kash, and that in the case of the malachas b'rabutza, Viktani potter. Says Mastis, no. The answer is Mastis and the Kiyo Chemaski. And our Mishnah speaking about where he was walking along normally. In other words, in our Mishnah speaking about where he crashed into him, he's walking along normally. So there you could say there's Chiyah, but over here, but in the case of the animal walking along and kicking the one who was laying down, the one who's laying down could say, you have permission to walk by and walk over me, but you don't have permission to kick me. And therefore, it's not a kasha from that Mishnah in this case here. Yeah. We answer your problem?
The shore becomes a boar. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Right. When you say the animal that fell down and was lying down on the road.
Right.
That's a boar.
That's right.
Shore becomes
It's like
a boar.
boar. That's right.
So he's not responsible.
No, he's responsible for yeah. But in this case, first of all, according to Shmuel, you could say it's a boar, but the animal's lying down. The owner is he didn't leave him there. It wasn't like he abandoned him there and he got hurt that way. He's responsible for he was responsible for damage done. But no. Let's say even if it is a boar, but he's responsible for the other animal. You can't say your animal. The animal's not necessarily the animal is not Kalim. Shore below. In other words, let's say the first animal is a boar. The animal laying down is a boar, but the animal that got hurt, the boar is responsible for damage that he does to another animal. You put it for Kalim, for clothing, for vessels. It says v'nafal shama shor o chamor, right? If you open up a boar and the shor chamor fell in there, you're responsible for that. That's the case. Even if you're saying it is a boar.